A small town in the Wild West is located on the outskirts of the desert near the mountains and cliffs. At the entrance to the city, it is very empty. There are no people on the street at all, and it may seem at first glance that this city is dead. From the tavern located in the city center, you can hear the voices of people inside the building. The life of the visitors is in full swing. The waiter is shouting to bring them food as quickly as possible. People are placing orders. There are a huge number of people inside the tavern. The entire city is now here, and they are on their lunch break. One of the men asked his comrade if he had heard about the Mansock merchant detachment that was defeated. He saw that his interlocutor knew nothing about this and said that this detachment had as many as 5 guards. Even they could not do anything. Only one porter returned back. He accused the Fighting Alliance of not being able to protect the merchants. The man finished the alcohol in his glass and then put the glass on the table and made a very loud sound. The second man answered his interlocutor that people who deserve to die can simply walk around the world and not be afraid of being punished. He turned his head to the side and looked at the next table at which 4 men were sitting. And after that he said that there are now a lot of thieves in the villages and outside the villages. The first man asked his interlocutor to watch his tongue, because these thieves can hear him, and if they don't like something, then they can attack him. But the second man was not afraid that he would be heard, and said that he would not close his mouth just because of fear. An unfamiliar man appeared in the city, approached the doors of the tavern. The first man at that moment told his friend that if he is not afraid to say such things out loud to the bandits, why won't he say it to them personally? The stranger walked up to the door and opened it, and in order to enter, a long sword hung behind his back, and on his head he had a large straw hat. The guy entered the building. He was faithful and immediately attracted the attention of the visitors of this establishment. Everyone turned their attention to this stranger. 2 men turned their heads to this guy and began to look at him carefully. At the next table, 2 comrades were drinking alcohol, and they had to stop this process for a few seconds in order to look at the guy who had just entered the tavern. All the people who were in the establishment looked at the stranger who was standing near the door and began to examine him. Even the owner of the establishment was dissatisfied with the video of a stranger here. The guy in a calm voice asked the owner of the establishment where he could sit down. The owner would try to be friendly and tell this guy that he can sit where it is convenient for him and the waiter will come up to him now. The stranger began to walk around the establishment, looking for a table at which he would like to sit. The people in the establishment continued to look at him with an incredulous gaze. The stranger chose a table for himself in the farthest part of this tavern. This table was near the window when the guy sat on the chair. He took off his straw hat and put it on the table. The owner of the establishment approached the guy and brought him a decanter of alcohol after he put this decanter on the table. He told the stranger not to pay attention to the looks of the visitors. The stranger was surprised. I looked at the owner, and the owner told him that the people here are not used to strangers because rarely anyone walks in this area. Not to mention the fact that lately it has been restless here. He said that for some reason they were experiencing a flow of unfamiliar visitors. And after that, he asked the guy if he wanted something to eat. The stranger replied that he wanted to order what they could cook here the fastest. The owner smiled when he heard such an order and said that this stranger was most likely dying of hunger. He promised him that he would quickly prepare a bowl of noodles, so he would only have to wait a few minutes. The stranger looked at the owner and asked who else came to this establishment besides him. At that moment, a man jumped up in the center of the tavern and began shouting very loudly that he was dissatisfied with the game of dominoes. This man began to accuse the people who were sitting at the table with him of cheating during the game. The owner of the establishment pointed his finger at the people who were playing at the far table and made it clear to the stranger that these were the very people who came to his establishment, and they were strangers. He looked carefully at these guys and drank alcohol from his glass. He was thinking about something. A man who made a scandal about being deceived during a game hit the table with his fist, and the dominoes scattered in different directions. He said that there was a clear video of how his opponent cheated during the game, but his opponent behaved very calmly and said that he did not agree with the accusations and he played honestly. He answered the man who was standing in front of him and said that you should not accuse a person of cheating if you yourself do not know how to play. A man asked this guy a question and asked why he was winning all day. And the man himself only does what he loses, and his opponent answered because it's all because he just plays badly, and the other players won at least something, but only he lost all games. The stranger carefully watched this conflict, and at some point even smiled when he realized that the situation was getting out of control. He stood up at the table and started walking towards these guys. As he walked, he said that he had finally found this idiot. The conflict between these two men escalated into another scam, but the guy in purple clothes said that his opponent had no evidence. He started insulting the angry man for going and accusing someone of anime evidence. These words greatly angered the already aggressive man, and he could not restrain himself and pushed his opponent's shoulder with his hand. They were so angry that they were going to go outside to resolve this conflict and fight. A man in purple clothes is ready to fight with a disgruntled player and punch him in the face, but sudden people stop him. He turned his head back to see who decided to stop him and saw a stranger standing behind him. The stranger knew that this purple-robed man's name was Yang Gwen and said that he had finally managed to find this charlatan. Yang Gwen saw the stranger's face and shouted his name, Zhang Qian, in a frightened voice. A disgruntled player intervened in their dialogue and said that they could talk later, but for now they needed to sort things out among themselves. Zhang Qian looked at this man with a contemptuous look and said that he has nothing to do with him. Therefore, it is better for him to just shut up. Yang Guan began to feel scared and awkward when he saw this guy in front of him and asked him what he was doing here. Zhang Qian said that 2 whole months had already passed since their last meeting, and he was always looking for Yang Gwen. Zhang Qian saw that Yang Gwen and his gang were doing very well, which made the guy angry, and he realized that he was not doing as well as these guys. Yang Gwen asked in a frightened voice, was he able to find his friends and kill them? Zhang Qian said that he found all his friends and they are no more. Now only Yang Gwen remains, and he is the last. Yang Gwen began to step back and try to calm the guy down. He tried to justify himself and say that he never intended to deceive the martial artist in dominoes. Zhang Qian was dissatisfied with this guy's excuses and said that he didn't mean to do it, but did it anyway. I deceived the martial artist. Yang Gwen didn't know what to answer to this man and just started smiling and stepping back. The only thought that came to his mind was to try to run away from here as far as possible in order to stay alive. Zhang Qian was surprised by the impudence and stupidity of this man. He couldn't even believe that this guy was so stupid if he thought he would run away from a martial artist. He grabbed his hand by the hair and thereby did not allow him to run far. Yang Gwen began to scream very loudly in pain and try to get out of this grip. Zhang Qian was very angry with this man's action and therefore hit his head on the table with all his strength, and the food that was on the table scattered in different directions. The man who was sitting at the next table was extremely surprised, and when I saw that a fight was starting to happen here, 2 men continued to drink alcohol, but they had to stop when they saw that the stranger was beating up the charlatan, who was pretty tired of everyone in this establishment. Yang Gwen tried to justify himself and shouted that he did not want to deceive the martial artist, and he did not do it. But it all sounded very unconvincing. Yang Gwen said that Zhang Qian was the only player who stayed until the very end and lost. All his money was shaken out of him to the last coin. Zhang Qian did not want to listen to this little thief's stupid excuses and decided to bring him to the frequency to prove that he was actually cheating. He put his hand into his hand in Yang Gwen's shirts to find a hidden domino dice. He managed to find this game bone and thereby prove that this person cheats during his games and deceives the players. The man who was cheated during the game a few minutes ago finally saw the evidence that this man was a charlatan and realized that he was right. Zhang Qian said that he only had one question for this worthless thief, and he asked where his money is now. Yang Gwen said in a low, frightened voice that he used this money to pay off the martial alliance. Zhang Qian took this bastard by the head with his hand and hit him with his face on the table. after which he said that his money should not be spent to pay for his search. Yang Guan said that he simply had no other choice. After all, if he had not paid for his search, he would not have even been able to enter the tavern to eat. Zhang Qian grabbed his hair and lifted his head up after that. He tried to take a deep breath and exhale in order to calm down and understand how this problem can be solved. He grabbed his shirt collar and wanted to punch him in the face with all his might. But before that, he asked if he had any money. Yang Guan replied that he had some money that he was able to earn in this tavern lately, and if the martial artist wants money, he can take these coins. Zhang Qian looked at the gaming table and saw that there was a small handful of gold coins and a bag of money on it. He looked at the approximate amount of money that was lying on the table and realized that this amount was much less than he expected, but at least it was some money. Zhang Qian threw this idiot aside and went to the table to collect his money. The people who were in the tavern stood up from their tables and began to gather around Yang Guan. The man yelled at the stranger and asked him to stop and not take this money. He said that this money that this charlatan won by deception is this man's money, and he would like to return it back. Zhang Qian said that this is not his problem, and if he needs his money back, then let him personally ask for it from Yang Guan. He needed a few seconds to think about these words and decide what to do next. This man was pretty stupid, but when he finally realized that this stranger would now take his money, he again felt incredible rage and said that he was not happy with these options. He wanted to take his money back. He extended his hand forward in order to push the stranger aside and not allow him to take the money. Zhang Qian grabbed the man's hand and held on tightly. After that, he pulled this man by the arm and threw him aside. The man did not expect that the situation would lead to a fight and fell to the floor and hit his face on a wooden covering. The rest of the men who were in this establishment were shocked that the stranger came to their territory, took their money, and also fought with the rest of the visitors. The man came out of the crowd and said that he would not tolerate such an attitude from a stranger, after which he shook his hand into a fist and wanted to strike the stranger. Zhang Qian dodged this blow without much effort and realized that a fight could no longer be avoided. After he dodged the blow, he decided that he needed to immediately launch a contour attack and punched the man in the chest with his fist. After this, he immediately decided to strike a man standing nearby who was watching the fight from the side. He grabbed the two men by the collars of their shirts and began to pull them towards each other. He made the two men crash their foreheads into each other and received very heavy damage. After the collision, they began to feel dizzy and could not find their way around in space. They were able to stand on their feet for a few seconds, but then lost consciousness and fell to the floor. The rest of the people who were in the establishment saw that real chaos was beginning here and decided that it was better for them not to interfere in this conflict. Yang Guan saw that Zhang Qian alone was able to knock out 3 strong men at once and realized that now he would most likely want to hit him and began to shake with fear. Zhang Qian heard this deceiver shaking and almost crying and decided to come closer to him. Yang Guan tried to crawl back and asked for forgiveness, and he begged not to be killed and left alive. Zhang Qian grabbed this weakling by the collar of his shirt and said that the money he took from the table was not enough for him to leave him alone. Suddenly, one of the men was able to recover after taking heavy damage and turning to the stranger again. He accused the stranger of breaking his nose and said that he would have to answer for it at the cost of his life. Zhang Qian apologized for having to hit this man, but he said that he lost a lot more money to this man with some small change that was lying on the table. The man began to behave very strangely. He did not continue the dialogue, but simply turned around and began to run towards the exit. Zhang Qian asked what was wrong with this idiot and why did he run away. But Yang Guan replied that this man's name was Jin Youngsuk. Zhang Qian said that he was not interested in the name of this idiot and continued to extort money from this charlatan. Zhang Qian said that he has little time left to return the money to him. After all, if he doesn't do this, he will have to break his dantian. It will be very painful. Yang Guan said that there is no need for this, that a very weak person, if his dantian is broken, he will be completely useless. But Zhang Qian was not going to joke or forgive this thief and wanted his money back. Otherwise, He would not mind killing or maiming this Yang Guan. He didn't understand what they were doing to him, how to correct this situation, but he felt that he needed to think as quickly as possible because his opponent's patience would now run out. Yang Guan said that he knows how to fix this situation, but first he needs to be released. Because he has one artifact in his pocket, Zhang Qian took him at his word and let him go. After that, Yang Guan sat down on the floor and reached into the inner pocket of his vest with his hand. He put his hand forward, and in the center of his palm lay a jade ring. Zhang Qian carefully examined this ring, and Yang Guan said that he bought this ring in the city and said that it is real jade. If he can find a good buyer, he will receive a good amount for this ring. He asked Zhang Qian's brother, "Will this ring be enough to finally pay him off?" He took this ring and squeezed it into his fist so that no one would see it. Zhang Qian smiled when he felt that he had a real jade ring and said that this artifact would be enough to end the conflict. He put the ring in the inside pocket of his jacket and remembered that all this time they were watched by a crowd of people who were in the tavern. He looked at them with a dissatisfied look and tried to understand what he should do now. People were frightened by this behavior of a stranger and did not know what else to expect from him. Zhang Qian asked the owner of the establishment why his bowl of noodles is still not on his table because he ordered it quite a long time ago. The establishment became quiet and calm. The owner went to the kitchen and prepared noodles for the new guest, after which he brought it to him and put it on the table. Yang Guan carefully watched Zhang Qian eat his noodles and felt that a feeling of hunger was awakening in him. He told the guy that now is not the right time to eat noodles carefree. He tried to warn him that he had better quickly eat his food and get out of here. He said that Zhang Qian was acting too calmly and did not understand that he was in great danger because the person whose nose he broke was a very influential person. Zhang Qian put an empty plate of food on the table and thereby showed that he had finally finished the noodles. After that, he took a glass of alcohol and drank it in one gulp, thereby demonstrating that he was not afraid of anyone, and Yang Guan's warning did not scare him. Zhang Qian said that he finally finished his food and is now ready to listen to everything Yang Guan tells him. The man said that Jin Yang-suk can and looks like he walks, but no one touches him here because his older brother is a martial artist. Zhang Qian said that he is not afraid to fight a martial artist because he is a master himself. Yang Guan replied that he knows this, and all people have at least once heard about the master of fist-fighting Zhang Qian from Amju, but everyone insists that his sword is just an accessory until he pulls it out. Zhang Qian did not understand what the problem was and asked his interlocutor to get closer to the point and say directly what the problem was, and Yang Guan said that your idiot brother whose nose he broke is the problem, but the main problem is that the elder brother Jin Chang-suk is from the Kadavra clan of the Chaos sect. Zhang Qian reminded his interlocutor that he told him that there is a fighting alliance here, and even despite this, the Chaos sect is still hanging around in the area. Yang Guan finally saw that his interlocutor was interested in this topic and said that he could tell him the information for a few silver coins. Zhang Qian smiled when he heard that the weak one was coming, still had the courage to ask him for money. He threatened him with his fist, and the charlatan immediately calmed down. He said that he shouldn't use his fists, and he would tell everything just like that. Yang Guan cleared his throat to begin telling this story and said that his interlocutor's character was unique. Yang Guan spoke about his assumptions that the boss of this sect and the leader of the Combat Alliance are somehow connected with each other. Therefore, the Combat Alliance is not being restlessly carried out yet. Don't touch them, and Chang-suk is the most important among them. Zhang Qian asked Yang Guan how he had the brains to run into this man's younger brother, and the man replied that usually these people behave calmly, and what happened today happens all the time. Zhang Qian replied that before, the Martial Alliance introduced itself much better, closely followed the order. Yang Guan smiled and replied that now it is more cordial to live, or they think the same. Apparently due to the fact that they are often complained about. They open their mouths so easily on strangers' suspended lands. Zhang Qian suggested to his interlocutor to pack his things and get out of here as quickly as possible. But Yang Gwen replied that there is one problem why he cannot do this. He looked carefully at his interlocutor and decided to find out what kind of problem he had. Yang Gwen drew attention to the people sitting at the next table and said that apparently they have a bad reputation in this city. The men sparring at the next table looked with distrust at the strangers who calmly communicated in this establishment. The local residents treated strangers with distrust and hatred, especially those who staged a pogrom and a fight here today. Yang Gwen said that it is best to avoid people from the alliance because they cannot cause much trouble, and Zhang Qian replied that he only avoids them because he is a weakling. But in fact, there is no point in being afraid of them. The owner of the establishment approached them and addressed specifically Zhang Qian. He put in several gold coins that the stranger had given him before. He said that he would not tolerate unrest in his establishment, and therefore decided to return him the money for the noodle soup and the room that this man rented. The owner very politely asked strangers to leave this establishment and not come here again. Yang Gwen began to laugh and said that if everything has already reached the point that the owner himself is personally kicking you out and I want to, then it's better to leave, because if people from the clan come, they will have big problems and it will be difficult to get out of here alive. Zhang Qian did not intend to immediately leave the establishments and decided to continue finishing his noodles. The owner and Yang Gwen were shocked by this guy's behavior. They didn't understand why he was behaving so brazenly. They watched as he loudly began to slurp and chew his food. Zhang Qian decided to finish his portion of noodle soup. He put the empty plate of noodles on the table and calmly continued to sit in his place. His stomach started to growl very loudly after he finished eating these noodles, and he burped loudly. Zhang Qian began to pick his teeth with his finger in order to pick out pieces of meat from there, and said that everything would be fine, and he was not afraid of the alliance and the sect. Yang Gwen said that the Cadaver clan has about 20 people, and asked what he was going to do if they didn't come here now. Zhang Qian decided to pour alcohol from the decanter into his cup and drink some more. He was not afraid that someone might come here. Yang Gwen said he would leave on his own. Zhang Qian said that he should have left here earlier instead of talking to him. But now it's too late because these people came here. The man took a step forward and opened the doors to this establishment. He was a tall man with black hair and a very strong build. He was wearing a long red vest. His face was very angry, and he wanted to deal with the man who broke his brother's nose. He began to warm up his fists before a fight and asked his younger brother which of these people offended him and broke his nose. Jin Young-suk pointed his hand to the far table and said that these were the same guys who deceived him, robbed him, and broke his nose. The older brother asked his younger brother how it happened that he was robbed, and Young-suk replied that it doesn't matter, and the most important thing is that these people are scammers. The older brother called him a non-entity and said that he could not deal with his problems on his own. And after that he began to meet these guys halfway. He stood opposite them and said that they don't look like locals, and asked if they should have broken up and started a fight in a foreign village. The owner approached the thug in a quiet, careful voice and said that they were earning little now and would not be able to buy new tables, so he asked them not to break the furniture. The big man looked at the owner of the establishment with a reproachful look and made him understand that he had better leave here. The owner of the establishment opened his eyes so wide for the first time in a long time because he was scared and realized that he really had better leave here. He began to walk towards the kitchen and grumbled under his breath that his establishment would soon go bankrupt because of these fights. Yang Gwen started to panic and try to run away from here, but Zhang Qian told him to sit still if he didn't want to die right now. Yang Gwen didn't understand why this guy acted so confidently and calmly. Several more people entered the building. These were also members of this clan. They came here to punish these strangers. Some of them were armed with clubs. A serious fight was brewing in the tavern. The clan members were angry because the strangers were behaving very arrogantly. Yang Gwen couldn't even imagine how they would resolve this conflict, because there were a lot of enemies, and there were only 2 of them. The big guy approached these guys and said that he was very pleased to meet them, and his name was Jin Chung-suk. He said that he was solving problems in this village. He informed the strangers that this place is very calm, so he is idle all the time since there is little work here. But today he finally has a job, and he will gladly fulfill his duty. Zhang Qian sat calmly at the table and drank alcohol. He didn't even pay attention to this thug. Jin was very surprised by the calmness of this man. He didn't understand where he got so much courage from. Yang Gwen held and jumped up from his seat. After that, he began to correct the situation verbally and said that there was a misunderstanding between them. Ian said that a few days ago he came to this city and heard many stories about the greatness of this thug, so he really wanted to meet him. He tried to gain confidence in this thug so that he would not be knocked down and said that their meeting was a real destiny. He introduced the man who was sitting opposite him at the table and said that his name was Zhang Qian, and this guy also came to the city not long ago. Jean pointed his finger at this cowardly weakling and said that he was a fraud. Yang Guan understood that this conflict could not be corrected with words and tried to justify himself and say that he was not a fraudster, but he did not succeed. Jin pointed his hand at the sitting guy and said that this guy is a bully, and both need to be punished for this. He accused them of suddenly showing up in this quiet city and deceiving the residents. And in response to the dissatisfaction of his younger brother, who could not stand such a spectacle, they responded with their fists and will be punished for this. Yang Gwen was insanely frightened by this decision of this issue and understood that today he would not leave here unpunished. Zhang Qian calmly continued to sit at the table and did not betray his emotions. He would be cold and insensitive at this moment. Jin said that he was forced to take them to the Fighting Alliance and detain them as criminals, and advised them not to resist, otherwise it would only get worse. When Zhang Qian heard this man's threats against him, all he did was laugh. He said that this whole situation looks very funny, and this is the first time he has heard such threats addressed to him, and is not used to the fact that they don't want to kill him right away. Jin told him that he was a righteous man from the world of martyrs, and he would never kill a man in a hotel in broad daylight. But for what he did to his brother's nose, he won't allow this stranger to leave the village with his limbs intact. He leaned towards his face and said that for this act he would break his arms and legs, and if this guy resisted, she would tear off what was between his legs. Yang Gwen was so scared that he could wet his pants from fear at any moment. The people who came to detain them started laughing with him. Their behavior is this weakling, and they understood that they could make fun of him thoroughly. Zhang Qian finally came out with this goon's idiotic speech and said that if a person acts so calmly in such a situation, shouldn't people be wary and think that this guy might have something? Zhang Qian said that he may be not just a strange person, but a real soldier of the Imperial Army. He asked Jin if this big guy was afraid to get involved with a soldier of the Imperial Army, and Jin was pretty scared at that moment. He stepped back, and she was scared, and kept asking him in a trembling voice whether he was actually a soldier of the Imperial Army. Jin bowed low to this man and said that he was wrong and did not recognize the man who is a soldier of the Imperial Army. He immediately apologized to him for the inconvenience. Zhang Qian started laughing. At this moment, because this big guy felt very weak and acted like he was walking, then he said that he was not a soldier of the Imperial Army. Jean, at that moment, I felt helpless and deceived. Rage began to awaken in him, and he began to lose control of himself. Jin said that such a joke would definitely not break his neck. But there was no point in talking because Zhang Qian was tired of joking and mocking these guys and finally decided to start a fight. He threw a powerful kick with his foot right at Jaw's Jin. After that, Zhang Qian tried to jump over the table in order to start a fight with the steel members of this sect, and their boss at that moment flew back. He carefully watched as the big man tried to stay on his feet, but he couldn't do anything. Jin walked back and fell onto one of the tables on which there was food. Plates began to fly in different directions. The table and chairs were broken. The boss himself fell to the ground and blood flowed out of his mouth. His assistants approached him to see what happened to him, but Jin was unconscious. His blood continued to flow from his mouth and stained the wooden polos. His teeth were broken and lay near his head. Jaws. The clan members were shocked by this stranger's behavior. They did not expect him to be so strong. The younger brother understood that the older brother who was supposed to protect him had now received very severe damage and was left without teeth. Yang Guan carefully watched this fight from the side. He was shocked that this guy was not really that strong. He couldn't even believe that he had just been able to knock out Jin himself with one blow. Zhang Qian said that he was tired of meeting weak opponents and was waiting for someone to fight back besides the Imperial Army. The man was furious that this guy had just allowed himself to attack their boss and ordered the others to attack him and kill him. They began to carry out the order and ran towards this stranger in order to attack him. One of these guys swung his baton and wanted to hit Zhang Qian, but the martial artist just laughed when he saw this blow and said that his movements were absolutely clumsy, and if he fought like that, he would come out of here dead. He clenched his fist tightly and was preparing to strike his opponent, and before that he said that they were just a bunch of ordinary bandits. After this guy took damage to his jaw, he felt his teeth start to break. He couldn't even imagine that his opponent would be so strong and dexterous. Another enemy armed with a club began to run towards him and wanted to strike him from behind. Zhang Qian did not notice his opponent in time and swung his leg to strike him back. He kicked him right in the head. His heel hit the enemy directly in the forehead and changed its shape in the skull. Zhang Qian looked around him to understand how many more enemies were here. He needed to assess the situation. He immediately delivered another blow to the guy who was to his right. Zhang Qian dealt quick blows to his opponents, and they did not even have time to fight off these attacks. He punched one of his enemies in the jaw from the side. Then he jumped to the side and dodged this attack that the enemy wanted to inflict on him. Zhang Qian delivered an elbow strike directly to his opponent's chest and broke his ribs. This bandit felt very severe pain and found it difficult to breathe. Zhang Qian had just gotten the hang of it and was ready to fight further. He enjoyed beating up these guys because they were like training dummies for him. He delivered the next blow to his enemy right in the face. After the bandit was hit in the face, his jaw immediately became broken. Behind him stood two more bandits armed with clubs, but they were already afraid to go into battle because they understood that it was pointless. Zhang Qian looked at these two guys and stopped, but he saw that they were very scared and he decided to take advantage of this. He tried to bring their fear to its climax and looked them straight in the eyes. They saw him as a monster who could not be stopped. He was just another chaos for them. But suddenly a man came into the building and ordered everyone here to stop. Zhang Qian looked carefully at this man and tried to understand who he was and why. He allowed himself to stop this fight. Yang Guan saw the badge on this man's jacket and realized that this was most likely the sheriff of this village. He was an adult man of about 50. He had long brown hair and a large mustache. He was dressed in black clothes and had a sheriff's badge on his jacket. This icon means that the person standing in front of them is a member of the fighting alliance. Yang Guan did not understand what would happen now because a member of the alliance would arrest them all, and then they would have even more problems. Zhang Qian looked attentively at this man and waited to see how further events would develop. The bandits who stood there the day before were frightened by the sheriff's visit. Near the sheriff stood two soldiers armed with swords, and the sheriff himself asked the stranger if he knew who they were. Zhang Qian was not worried or afraid of this man. He said that apparently this man is the head of the Martial Alliance Department. This could be understood from his badge that hung on his jacket. The sheriff smiled and closed his eyes. He was amused by the calm behavior of the stranger. He began to walk slowly towards this guy and said that after all, if he really is the head of the Combat Alliance Department, he reported that he had just received a complaint from local residents that this stranger had attacked local townspeople. Jin Young-suk pointed his finger at this stranger and said that he didn't just attack, he crippled him. And his brother Zhang Qian and Yang Guan were unhappy that this upstart was constantly complaining to everyone about their behavior and telling everyone about what they had done here. Jin Young-suk said that this guy knocked out his older brother, and now all his teeth are knocked out, and he won't be able to eat food properly. The sheriff asked this guy if it was true that he knocked out this thug. Zhang Qian replied that this was a necessary measure, and he needed to defend himself, and he would not have done this if he had not been attacked first. The sheriff was dissatisfied with this answer and he asked again what self-defense meant in his understanding. Zhang Qian replied that everything was exactly as it was. 9 people attacked him at once, and 8 of them had batons in their hands. The sheriff said this guy looks safe and sound. That's very strange. Zhang Qian replied that it was just a coincidence that the people who attacked him turned out to be just a bunch of weaklings, but that's their problem. The sheriff smiled and lowered his head down. He was amused by the behavior of this stranger. Zhang said that he did not kill anyone and everyone remained alive after the fight, but in self-defense, he injured them. Jin Young-suk could not calm down and asked the chief why he did not apprehend this criminal because his older brothers are now unconscious. He pointed to his nose and said that this man attacked him and broke his nose. The sheriff was now in a difficult position, and he needed to make the right decision about what he would do with this guy. He ordered his 2 soldiers to apprehend this criminal. They answered in unison that they would immediately carry out the boss's order and took a fighting stance in order to detain the criminal. Jin Young-suk began to laugh and rejoice at his victory, and said that it was better not to mess with him because he is an influential person in this village. He said that even a martial artist would have a hard time dealing with a martial alliance. Suddenly he felt that everything was not going according to plan, and the battle alliance approached him from behind. They held Jin Young-suk and made a trap around his neck that prevented him from getting out or escaping. Zhang Qian was surprised by this decision of the sheriff. He didn't understand why they decided to detain this particular upstart. But he was satisfied with this decision. Jin Young-suk tried to find out from the sheriff why he decided to detain him instead of the stranger who started these fights here. The sheriff was very angry at this idiot's behavior, and said that the 9th person along with Jin Chang-suk were now lying on the floor unconscious. He said that it was not profitable for him to tolerate a person because of whom so many people suffered just because he lost his money. Jin Yan-suk did not expect that the sheriff would make exactly such a decision, and now he had nowhere to go. He set himself up and would be punished for it. The sheriff said that of all the fighters present here, only Jin Chang-suk and Moon Ju showed that they use martial arts and at least somehow master them. And if this opponent is alone, then the sheriff himself can deal with him. After that, he said that his assistants would deal with everyone else. Jin Yan-suk began to threaten the sheriff that when his brother wakes up, he will definitely punish the sheriff for such an act. But the sheriff said that it was a bad idea to intimidate him. Then he snapped his fingers and thereby gave the order to his soldiers to kill this guy. The new alliance soldiers entered this correctly, and Jin was taken away as a prisoner. The sheriff stood in the center of the room, and the rest of the members of the combat alliance began to enter the room. And the sheriff himself said that the elder brother would wake up, and he would already be behind bars. Zhang Qian observed all the situations from the side, and understood that because of him, half the village was now arrested. All gang members were tied up with ropes and began to be taken out of the tavern one by one and taken to prison. The warriors of the combat alliance took those who were lying on the floor unconscious by the arms and legs and began to carry out their bodies. Zhang Qian took his straw hat from the table and wanted to put it on his head. When he put it on, he immediately headed to the exit to leave this place. The sheriff asked this guy to stop. He said that Jin Chang-suk is not a martial artist, but he is very good at fighting, and was very surprised that the stranger could easily deal with him. He asked where this guy learned such martial arts. Zhang Qian heard the sheriff's question, but didn't want to answer it right away. Thought about his question for a bit. He decided not to answer this question, and instead continued to head towards the exit in order to get out of here. Zhang Qian put his hand into the inner pocket of his long jacket and pulled out a bag of money, after which he saw the owner of the establishment and said that this was money for the inconvenience caused. He put the bag of coins on the table and thanked the owner for feeding him delicious noodles. Zhang Qian continued to walk towards the exit of the establishment, and the sheriff watched this guy leave. There was nothing I could do, and there was no way I could stop him. All he could do was watch him go. The sheriff noticed that this stranger is a very taciturn guy, and he clearly does not like to talk. When he left, the doors moved from side to side for some time. It was very hot in the desert, and the wind scattered the sand. I picked it up from the earth, Evening was already approaching, and at such a time it was very dangerous to be in the desert yourself. Zhang Qian saddled his horse and set off on a journey. He needed to find a new place where he could safely spend the night and relax. Young Gwen followed him and asked this guy to wait for him. After all, he wanted to go with him. He said that Zhang Qian alone was able to deal with all the problems in this city, but still continues to pretend that he was driven out of here. He asked why the boss made this particular decision. Zhang Qian replied that this was because one of the employees of the Fighting Alliance came for the criminal, and if he had already made noise, then it was better to leave the city. Young Gwen asked him if he was worried about people gossiping behind his back in this city. Young Gwen spoke about what he knows about the group of the Combat Alliance that patrols the local territories, and they may meet on their way. Young Gwen was surprised that the boss did not have time to do anything, as the patrol group was already ready. However, this groom appeared Zhang Qian and single-handedly defeated all the criminals. He was surprised that the boss adapts to the circumstances so quickly and changes his shoes only because it's more profitable. Zhang Qian did not know what to answer to his interlocutor, and therefore simply continued to silently ride his horse. Yang Gwen could not calm down and constantly called the members of the Combat Alliance idiots or mentally retarded people because smart people would not serve the Combat Alliance. He admitted that it was all very unexpected and asked if he wanted to work with him. A road sign appeared in front of them, pointing in 2 different directions, and they stopped their horses near this road sign. Yang Gwen asked Zhang Qian where he was going because he wanted to go on a further journey with him. But Zhang Qian was not happy with this proposal and said that he wanted to get away from him and never see that vile face again. Young Gwen began to laugh and feel awkward. He tried to find out why he dislikes him so much. Zhang Qian replied that he hopes to never meet this swindler again. If this happens, then after all, he has enough brains to follow him. Then he will break his leg. Yang Gwen. I tried to stop this guy and asked him to just listen to him. He wanted to somehow persuade him to take him with me. But Zhang Qian didn't even want to listen to the words of this charlatan and simply continued to ride forward alone. Yang Gwen sat astride his horse and watched as his only friend is now driving away into the distance and he can't do anything about it. He was left alone and all he cared about was that this guy was behaving very arrogantly and where he even came from. After all, this person does not look like people from the Amju Valley. He thought that it would be very good if he could find out some information about this person, because it could be very useful for him, and he could then sell this information. Yang Gwen understood that he needed to move to the next city because the sun was already setting, and it would be very dangerous to travel at night, and he would not be able to return back to this city. Night fell, and the moon hung in the center of the sky. It illuminated the desert and was the only source of light for lost travelers. He lit a fire and decided to stop and take a break to wait for the morning. He poured water from a jug into his glass. After this, Zhang Qian decided to drink water to remove his thirst, but he absolutely didn't like the taste of this water. He spat it out and couldn't even swallow it. It tasted disgusting and was impossible to drink, so the best choice for him was to cure the terrible water, and next time he saw that his horse was standing next to him and wanted something from him, she looked at him carefully. Suddenly, the horse began to make strange noises and wave its head in different directions. She was very tired and fell to the ground to sleep. The horse did this very suddenly, and the owner did not understand her behavior. He was angry that the horse was acting so strangely and said that someday he would sell it at the market or exchange it for a pair of new boots. After that, he placed the empty cup on the ground near him. He sat and watched the fire burn and tried to remember today and replay all the events that happened to him in his head. He remembered the sheriff who asked him where he learned these martial arts. He was very bored and decided to conduct a dialogue in his head and talk with this sheriff. He said that he learned this story about martial arts. After that, he let his head down and began to remember his past life, and he felt very sad about it. He remembered the time when he was still an ordinary guy in the real world, and even not to believe that he would actually fight using martial arts. He stood at the pedestrian crossing and waited for the light to turn green so that he could cross the road. At that moment, he was reading stories about martial arts on his phone and had a guitar hanging behind him. The traffic light was still red, which meant crossing the road was prohibited. But after a couple of seconds, the traffic light turned green and pedestrians could finally cross the road. Zhang Qian hid his phone in his jacket pocket and began to cross the road. From around the corner, you saw their car. It was a big bus that was rushing towards him and was not going to stop. He turned his head and saw this bus. The headlights blinded his eyes. A little girl walked ahead of him and also saw that a bus was coming towards her. She was confused and did not understand what to do. Zhang Qian felt that this was the moment when he had to save the life of this little girl, and he threw away his guitar and immediately jumped towards her to save her. The car was already very close, and only one could survive. Zhang Qian was able to save a little girl, and she survived for his life. He donated and was hit by a car. Now he would be a corpse that bleeds on a crosswalk. People who found near the accident site looked with horror at the situation that happened here. The car hit an innocent guy, and people immediately began to run to him in order to somehow help. On this day, it was a very beautiful night, and there were a huge number of stars in the sky. It was impossible to count them, but they were beautiful to look at. Zhang Qian sent it all to hell and said that he no longer wants to remember it because it brings bad emotions to him. He took his hat, which was lying not far from him. He put this hat on his head and realized that it would be best for him to get some sleep now. Zhang Qian sat near the fire and tried to sleep in order to gain as much strength as possible before setting off. He still could not believe that in such a strange way he got into this world. Zhang Qian went on the road in the morning and said that if he touched Domino at least once in his life, he would cease to consider himself a man, and was shocked that he had to go to the nearest city for so long. The horse was already very tired, and it was hard for her to go further in the desert. It was very hot, and she was thirsty. They were driving through the desert and did not understand how long they would have to be on the road. Zhang Qian saw something very strange and decided to stop here to take a closer look at what was happening there. The horse stopped listening to him, and he had to scold it so that it would stop and not move. He smelled the smell of blood that was carried on the wind, and the smell was very strong, as if a lot of people had died nearby. Near the broken caravan there were many corpses. Most of these people were killed with swords that were sticking out of their bodies. Everything in the area was stained with blood. There were dead merchants lying on the ground. They were also killed. Most likely they were attacked by bandits. Scattered around were the goods that the merchants were transporting. They were broken or scattered on the earth. Many people died for these goods. You can hear the voice of a man. He asks for help. Have mercy. Save me. He said that he would give everything up only if they spared him. He asked not to kill him, because if they kill him, he will not be able to give them anything. Opposite the person who asked for help stood a scary man. He was missing one eye and had a terrible scar on his right eye. He had very large teeth, strong build. He held his hands with a sword and told the merchant that he should have thought earlier. He asked the master for mercy and said that he had a family and children. The merchant was ready to give him everything he had left to stay alive. But this did not stop the bloodthirsty bandit. The words of the merchants seemed unconvincing. He took his sword and cut off his head. The robber laughed when he saw the severed head flying in the air. After the bandit cut off the merchant's head, a whole pool of blood splashed out and stained everything it touched. The robber looked at the headless corpse, smiled, and said that next time he advises him to say it right away. He's already an impatient man, and it's better not to joke with him. He told his bandits that they had already done everything that they had to do. Now they had finished. There was not a single person left alive from those who led this caravan. He ordered to take everything here and get out of here because they need to leave as soon as possible. He doesn't want anyone to find out that this was their doing. One bandit turned to the boss and said that these idiots had a lot of gold and jewelry, and now they won't have to worry about a lack of supplies, and they can relax because these idiots will pay them a well-deserved vacation. One of the robbers pointed his finger at the top of the sandy mountain and told the boss that it looks like they haven't cleared everything here yet and they have another problem. He was surprised that they had guests. He couldn't believe that someone really decided to come so close to them, and perhaps this rat had been watching them all this time. The bandit asked, "Is this guy standing there in the distance really so crazy that he decided to watch us and decided to show himself to them?" Zhang Qian said that it looks like these guys noticed him, and he needed to hide a little better. Now he will probably have another problem on his way. He said that he simply would not pay attention to them. Let them go their own way, and for now he will mind his own business. The robbers began to shout very loudly and celebrate their triumph. After all, they had just robbed an entire caravan, but they were still not given peace of mind by the presence of this guy. They decided that they needed to saddle their horses and go to meet this stranger. They needed to stop him before he told the authorities about what the bandits had done. He thought that they didn't want to let me go just like that. Apparently, he would have to try a little to get these guys to unhook from me. These fools still decided to attack him. This is their choice, and he has no right to object to them. Zhang Qian took his hat with 2 fingers and adjusted it. He pulled his horse by the reins and told it to run forward. They needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. Although this horse was not the most intelligent creature on this planet, at the right moment, she always obeys him. Zhang Qian forced the horse to gallop across these sandy plains. It ran so fast that it seemed to him that only lightning could catch up with them. The bandit shouted that this idiot was running straight at them. Is he really not afraid of them at all? Probably this guy just decided to come to them and die. He understands that he can't cope with them because there are more of them and they are stronger. They ran straight at him with their entire flock, but Zhang Qian was not afraid of them. He was ready to break through their defenses and show them what the real art of battle is. The leader of the pack shouted to the guy that he was an idiot and had gone completely crazy. He said that he would make him beg for his death. He would torture him until the guy admitted his insignificance. I ran to meet them in my hand. I already held the sword and was ready to enter into battle with them. In his past life, he read a lot about various battles and strategies. He read hundreds of stories about how one warrior is able to defeat a whole gang of robbers. This was his chance to prove that all the stories he read were true, and now is the time to find out about it. When he ran up to them as close as possible, he immediately began to swing his sword and chop their heads from their shoulders. He did it very quickly and delicately. They didn't even have time to understand anything. The bandit shouted that this crazy guy just killed Sang Young and Gyo Moon. He mercilessly cut off their heads. He said that he would cut off his head and take revenge on the stranger for the guys he just killed. This robber was very self-confident in his voice. Zhang Qian heard the anger and intent to avenge his brothers, but unfortunately he was too slow. He didn't even have time to defend himself from his sword. Zhang Qian very quickly cut him into 2 halves with a blow. When he ran past this guy, he saw a trail of his blood trailing behind him. With each murder, he became angrier and angrier. He wanted to kill them all, and he could no longer be stopped, because he again felt the taste of blood. Zhang Qian, with precise blows of his sword, cut off the heads of every robber who met him on the way. He tried to cut off the head, or cut the enemy into 2 halves. He wanted to take revenge on them for the merchant they had recently killed. Such vile creatures as these robbers do not deserve the right to life. They consider themselves gods who can decide other people's destinies, and he is the one who can resist such creatures. After him, all that will remain from these robbers are mutilated bodies and a small group of corpses lying with severed limbs. The bandit was very scared because he understood that in front of them was a real martial artist. They didn't understand where this crazy man came from, how he found them, and decided to run away from the battlefield. The boss wanted to spit in the face of his bandits because they are pathetic weaklings who are unable to defeat one guy. The bandit said that the boss himself saw with his own eyes how he fights, and they can't cope with him. This guy is a real sword master, and they won't be able to resist him. They were afraid of him because he single-handedly killed almost the entire gang. The boss approached one of his robbers and pierced him with his sword. He killed him so that this weakling would stop screaming and crying like a girl. The bandit asked what was going on and why did he just kill this guy. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just trying to escape from this crazy warrior. He saw that the boss was coming towards him and began to ask for mercy and did not want to be killed. But the leader of the robbers was already very upset that these two guys ran away from the battlefield and did not fight with the stranger. So he took his machete and threw it right at his head. The big man died immediately after the machete blade pierced his head. His body could not stay on the horse and immediately fell to the ground. The boss looked at the body of the killed robber and walked past him, but in the end he still stepped on his face with his foot and pulled his sword out of his head. Zhang Qian drove closer to this man. It was their leader. It was immediately clear from him that he was a cruel man, but he was not afraid of him. They met his eyes. He looked at the stranger with his eye, and Zhang did not see fear in him. He was not afraid of him at all, even after I cut off the head of all his robbers. This man frightened him and at the same time fascinated him with his composure, because human life meant absolutely nothing to him. He could afford to kill people and then sleep peacefully. Boss asked who this stranger is. He doesn't seem like a member of a fighting alliance, but he fights very efficiently. He said the leader of the robbers and Zhang answered him that he was just a respectable person passing by. The boss said, "Then, you are a respectable person who was just passing by and killed all my professional thugs. Why didn't you go further? Just like that. Why did you decide to get involved in these problems?" Zhang Qian said that he sees that the boss is not very smart because how could he allow himself to just pass by after seeing what they did here? And besides, how could he pass by them when they attacked him? The boss said that this is their job and nothing can be done about it. These are the rules of the game. They attack everyone who they don't like or who they consider suspicious. Zhang Qian said that killing people and robbing them is their job, and as far as he understands, Bass is a professional in this matter. Bass said that there is nothing else to do on the continent since 100 years have passed since its founding, and nothing has changed. The boss was angry with upstarts who dress nicely and profit from poor people. The Fighting Alliance, which received the support of the Empire, of course feel very good here, and he admitted that he even envies them to some extent. The ancient clan of the previous dynasty also feels good on these lands. They quickly mastered it here. Or merchant unions that use and earn money, and many others who constantly receive incredible incomes are engaged in cleaning nonsense. But he was indignant that these creatures lined their pockets by torturing those who tried to settle on this continent for 100 years. They mocked them all this time while they were just trying to survive here. He was just trying to do the same as they did. After all, they themselves call it work. So why don't they call his business work? Because he puts a lot of effort into his work and is trying to be like them. Zhang Qian just listened to him and wanted to understand the motives of this monster. He needed to find out why he was killing innocent people, and it turned out he was just an offended child who was not allowed to work at a normal job. Zhang Qian could no longer stand this stupid chatter, and therefore decided to get off his horse. When he jumped to the ground, he said that he had just heard the stupidest nonsense he had ever heard. Zhang said that in fact, the boss is the simplest crazy killer, obsessed with blood and easy prey, and he can't even imagine how much work these people have to do to have that kind of money. Zhang Qian wiped the blood from his sword so that he would have it clean. He likes it when his sword is stained with dirty blood. He sheathed his sword, raised his head to this bandit, and asked him. When the boss saw him, he asked if he was a member of the Combat Alliance, right? He opened his only eye wide in surprise and looked at the stranger with his stupid expression. Zhang Qian suggested that, therefore, there is a bounty on his head that could be very useful to him. When he heard his words, he turned away and began to laugh. At first, it was a slight, arrogant laugh, but then he began to laugh like a real psychopath. He turned to him, looked straight at him with his only eye, and continued laughing. He couldn't stop at some point. He finally answered that there was a reward for his head. He got into a fighting stance and took out his sword to prepare for battle. He held his sword with both hands, veins began to appear on his arms. He said that the reward will increase after people find out what he did. The boss said he won't let anyone take this award. He wondered how much this stranger's head would be worth after he killed him. Zhang Qian said that his friends were also as self-confident as he was, and suggested that all thieves have this problem. Zhang Qian said that if the boss is so interested in how much his head is worth, then he will let him check it in battle. He said that he was already angry enough with this thug, and there would be no mercy. The boss was at that moment accumulating red chakra in his hands. They stood opposite each other. Zhang Qian, as always, was in a cold mind and did not give in to emotions, but his opponent was completely different. He poured out all his rage and wanted to destroy him, intimidating him with his strength, but he was not afraid of him. The boss becomes uncontrollable, and this was his weakness. He could not control his aggression. You always need to wait for the right moments to attack, because it is better to deliver one precise blow to defeat than hundreds of blows that will lead to nothing. The crows were already beginning to flock to the corpses that were lying on the ground. They pecked out their livers. Suddenly the crow heard strange sounds. These were the sounds they made while preparing for battle. The bird realized that it was not alone here, and therefore it got scared and flew away. A crow flew over their heads and called the other birds to watch how two people would kill each other. The crows waited until one of us became another corpse. The robber ran straight towards Zhang Qian. He wanted to strike the first blow. The boss was like an indomitable flame that wants to burn everything in its path. But Zhang Qian preferred the wind technique, using a calm, sharp blow 5 seconds. This is the time it takes to kill a person. This is the time that separates him between life and death. A new mark from the blade of the sword appeared on his hat. His hat begins to collect more and more reminders of his opponents. The boss's face was red after he first met Zhang Qian's sword. This is the first time he sees such a face. At these moments, they take their last breath with the hope that they are safe and sound. But the reality is that when they take their first breath, blood begins to flow from their body. He fell to the ground exhausted. I managed to cut him into several pieces during the time he blinked. With his eyes, he didn't even understand what happened to him. Zhang Qian once again wiped the blood from his sword and sheathed it. He killed him so quickly that even he felt embarrassed by it, and he didn't even think that he could be so fast. Probably this guy really made him very angry with his stupidity. He decided to look at it after all, and was wondering what was left after he collided with the sword. His body was cut into several pieces, one leg was cut off, and I cut his arms in half. It was a terrible picture, but this is exactly the death this man deserved. Zhang Qian was about to leave here, but at some point he heard a man's voice. He shouted, "Hey warrior, come here!" The guy turned around to see that it was a voice. Is anyone really still alive here after all this bloodbath? Someone can still talk. It was a merchant in blue clothes, and with a bloody face he was exhausted. His fingers were broken, gathered all his strength to ask for help. Zhang Qian raised his hat and carefully decided to look at the person who asked him for help. He was surprised that this merchant was able to survive the attack by bandits. Zhang Qian came closer to him and helped him sit down. After that, he examined his wounds and said that fortunately the important organs were not affected, but the merchant lost a lot of blood. He told the traders that in this state he would not last long. The merchant heard this information and was upset. He lowered his head down and thanked the guy for being straightforward. Now at least he understood that he had little chance of survival. He apologized to the guy and said that not only did he meet, but he had one request for this guy. The merchant pointed with his hand to the neighboring cart and said that his son was hiding there in the cart. He managed to hide his child under a cart at a time when the bandits were busy with other merchants. He was very embarrassed to ask this stranger for such things, especially after he dealt with these bandits and killed them. But nevertheless, he did one favor for him. He said that his child is now only 8 years old and is easily scared, but he is not a stupid guy and will not bother a stranger if he takes him with him. Zhang Qian asked where his mother was now, and the merchant replied that she died during childbirth and her relatives. The crowning glory of his son was that she died, so he left everything and moved to a new continent to start over with his son. He put his hand on his stomach and saw that he had lost a lot of blood. After that, he said that he could not even imagine that everything would turn out exactly like this. The merchant told the guy that 3 days' drive from here to the east, there is a village called Chonsangok, and the boy's aunt lives in this village. She is the only wife in the family who loves him. He said that this woman knows martial arts and is well educated. She can generously reward a stranger for such help. Zhang Qian said that he doesn't know how to handle children, so he doesn't want to take on this, and suggested that the merchant do this business himself. He accumulated qi energy in his fingers. The merchant was outraged by this guy's answer, but he still did not understand what would happen next. Because Zhang Qian began to lightly touch his stomach with his fingers. This merchant's wound was healed after the stranger touched his stomach with his fingers. His skin began to heal and the blood disappeared. The merchant felt the pain in his stomach disappear, and he felt much better. He was very surprised when he saw that this stranger could use acupuncture with his bare hands. Zhang Qian replied that it was the merchant who understood such things, and he did everything very quickly, so the merchants still need to see a doctor. He asked the merchant if he had any medicine or bandages. But the guy himself at that moment was thinking that in this world it is possible to conduct acupuncture sessions with bare hands. In this world, an acupuncture session is performed by an experienced doctor. He carefully finds the blood vessels and inserts thick needles into them. In addition, to master this skill, you need to study a lot. Only experienced specialists do acupuncture. Of course, the residents of Murim know what acupuncture is. The doctor answered the guy that no martial artist had ever asked him to teach him acupuncture before. But Zhang Qian understood that if he learned this skill with his bare hands, he would be able to heal wounded soldiers, or even himself. People in this world believe that the lightning-fast, crushing attacks of the Imperial Army are the most powerful form of martial arts. But they are wrong. The merchant asked the stranger how he could thank him for what he did for him. Zhang Qian said that as a sign of gratitude he would take some coins from this merchant. It would be a better reward. The merchant replied that he would no problem reward this traveler with money for saving him from bandits and healing his wounds. He said that he needed to get to his son, and asked the guy to help him get up and walk to the next cart. They moved slowly because the merchant was still seriously wounded and had difficulty moving. When they approached the cart, the merchant immediately began to call for his son. He shouted his name, Huang. The man knelt down and opened the wooden door, after which he told the boy that everything was fine and he could go out. Huang got out from under the cart and was very happy when he saw his dad. He started crying. They hugged each other and didn't want to let go, because after everything they had experienced here, they didn't think that they would be able to see each other alive again. The merchant said that he was not feeling very well and asked the boy to be a little more careful when he hugs him. Juan just now saw that his father was covered in blood and asked his dad what happened to him. His father said he was fine, except that he had been stabbed with a sword and had a small wound in his stomach. He wanted to say that everything was fine with him, but he could not finish these words and began to fall. The boy did not understand what was happening to his father. He started screaming very loudly and asking his father not to close his eyes. He saw that he felt very bad. Zhang Qian heard the boy's screams and calmed him down. He said that the father simply lost consciousness because he felt relief and soon he would come to his senses again. Juan looked in surprise at the man who was not far from him. He had not noticed him before. This man said that his father lost a lot of blood. That's why he feels so bad now. Huang asked this stranger who he was and what his name was. He told this boy his name and said that his name was Zhang Qian. Huang didn't know what to say to strangers in such situations and just remembered his name. He said that he doesn't know what blood loss is and they don't understand why it affects his father so badly. Zhang Qian did not intend to sit here and communicate with this child for a long time, so he simply tried to collect all the resources he needed from the box and leave here. He closed the wooden box when he realized that there was nothing more to look for there. He found a bottle of medicinal drugs in the drawer that could help his father, and threw this bottle to the boy. Zhang Qian told the boy to treat his father's wound and then bandage it. Then he would feel better. Huan asked the stranger where he was going to go now. Zhang Qian replied that he wanted to bring a horse for them so that they could get out of here. Then he said that they would not be able to take the cart because it was broken. So he asked the boy to collect everything they needed and wait for him here. Zheng Qian began to go to the battlefield where he fought against the bandits because their horses should be there. Juan didn't understand anything at all. He was confused. After all, this man didn't explain anything to him. The boy assumed that this man would take them to the village. Zheng Qian went out to the battlefield and began to look out for the horses. He understood that they could not run far and were somewhere nearby. Suddenly he saw one horse that was standing near its dead owner and did not leave him. He thought that this was an ideal horse to give to a merchant with a child. He approached this horse, stroked its muzzle, and asked the horse if it wanted to get out of this desert and continue its existence. The animals didn't mind leaving here, but it was very smart, and therefore continued to look at its dead owner. On the reins of this horse it was written that it belongs to the captain of the 3rd Division, whose name is Kim Su-duk Zhang Qian, read this inscription and said that this is too simple a name for such a thug, and they could come up with something more interesting. Zhang Qian sat down on one knee next to his body and carefully began to examine the corpse. He thought that if this is the captain of the 3rd squad, then there are also the 1st and 2nd squads. He remembered that there was a good reward for the head of this thug, and if he took this die with him, it should be enough to prove that he killed him. He sat next to his body for a few more seconds, and suddenly saw this man's sword and thought that he needed to solve this matter for sure. Zhang Qian asked the father and child if they were ready to hit the road, but they didn't answer anything and just sat silently and looked at him with frightened eyes. He didn't understand why they were looking at him like that. It seemed very strange to him. But at that moment he tied the severed head of the leader of this gang to his horse. The merchant replied that everything was fine and I couldn't go here. But in fact, he was very scared when he saw the severed head. It was very quiet and calm in the desert. At some point the wind began to lift sand from the earth. They hit the road and drove past scattered things that were left after the bandit attack. Juan looked around carefully and tried to see everything that was happening here. He was very interested, but all he saw was just a bunch of corpses that lay on the ground and flowed with blood. Some of them had weapons sticking out of their chests. These were axes or swords, and some were deprived of their limbs. The father understood that his child should not have seen this, but at the same moment he could not forbid him to look at it because this is real life and the boy should get used to this from childhood. Juan got scared of all these dead children and started shaking. After that, he took his father's hand so that he wouldn't be so scared. The father hugged his son with his arms so that he would not worry and could sleep peacefully while I was not riding a horse. Zheng Qian thought that evening rain and wild animals were destroying everything that was left after the battle. After a short period of time, all these corpses will no longer be there. He wondered whether they would become gloomy ghosts of the underworld or be reborn like this man. No one knew the answer to this question, but he hoped that they would go to a place where they could forget about the pain and difficulties of life. This fleeting thought is the only thing he could allow himself in this wilderness. They walked all day towards the nearest town, and at some point night fell. They decided to make a halt and lit a fire. The fire burned very brightly and warmed their bodies in the darkness of the night. Zhang Qian carefully watched the merchant who was sitting not far from him, behaved quietly and calmly. He was still troubled by various thoughts. He thought that this merchant looked very bad, and at this rate, he wouldn't last 2 days. You couldn't demand more from him because he already sat on a horse being on the verge of death. And if he rode faster, they would start bleeding sooner. Zhang Qian filmed that it was us. The merchant urgently needs a doctor. If they don't hurry up, he just might die and the boy will be left without a father. He asked the merchant if there were other villages on the way to Jeonsangak, and the man told him that there was one village and he was going to spend the night there. He said that this is a small village near the lake called Nam Jako, and wanderers rarely go there because they do not know its existence. Zhang Qian asked the man if there was a doctor there and how long it would take to go there. The merchant said that it wouldn't take long to get to this village on horseback and they would already be there by lunchtime tomorrow. But if you take into account the speed that I moved today, you'll have problems with that. Zhang Qian said that most likely, at the speed at which they were traveling, they would only arrive in this village tomorrow evening, and suggested that they go to bed so that the merchant could gain strength before the trip. The man apologized to this stranger for causing him a lot of problems and difficulties, and creating constant inconvenience. Zhang Qian saw the severed head lying not far from him, and said that his difficulties were not only due to the merchant from one more person. The head lay near the wall, and a shadow from the fire formed around it. The fire continued to burn brightly. Even though it was already morning, the sun appeared in the sky and illuminated the surface of the earth with its rays. A detachment of fighters found corpses lying on the ground and saw one of the dead bandits. One man said that he died yesterday afternoon. The same person said that they were all killed at about the same time, and most likely it could have been done by one person. The head of this detachment said that it is most likely you who are the bandits they are looking for, and it looks like they were killed after they robbed the cart. The soldier said that they overestimated these bandits, and who could even think that they would all be killed in this way? The commander said that everything is not so simple, and during robberies they are divided into 3 detachments and then get together and divide the stolen money. But now there is only one detachment here. He was tired and happily informed his partner that now there was one less bandit group. He immediately thought that it was unreasonable for the 2 of them to try to deal with everyone at once. He said that now they would have to pay for the medicine that was allocated to them, and asked his partner if he could pay for the medicine if it was required of him. The guy scratched his head and replied that most likely he would not be able to pay for the medicine. The commander said that he noticed something interesting. He reported that the people in the cart did not particularly resist, but did not understand what happened on the battlefield. He suggested that most likely another person appeared, and he was not traveling separately in the cart. This person then killed all these people. My partner asked how one person could do all this. The commander of this small detachment turned out to be a girl, and she said that one person did it in each corpse. You can see the handwriting of his blows, but she doesn't understand how he did it. They were driving through the desert and were already beginning to approach the nearest village in the desert. A strong wind began to appear. The merchant said that this stranger's horse looked very bad, and it seemed to him that he was dying. Zhang Qian looked at this merchant in surprise and tried to understand why he was saying this. The merchant said that for the first time he saw a horse sleeping with its tongue hanging out. The boy replied that his grandfather had the same bull. His name was Kun. Zhang Qian was unhappy that this boy was behaving this way. He didn't like that Huang considered him his friend. The boy said that the bull that his grandfather had behaved exactly the same as a man, and his grandfather treated him badly. The merchant replied that 5 years had passed since his grandfather passed away, and the boy still remembers Huang said that he remembers this bull very well because he loved to watch it. Zhang Qian could not calm down because every time he looked at the merchant, he saw that he was getting worse and worse. He was holding on with all his strength. But if they find a doctor today, then this can be fixed, otherwise he may die. He heard the sounds of hooves and realized that someone was approaching them. When he turned his head, he saw a herd of horses and a rider and realized that they were already here. Zhang Qian was very surprised that they caught up with them so quickly. This is all due to the fact that they could not go faster, and therefore new problems will arise now. The merchant did not understand why they stopped because it would still take a long time to get to the village. The guy replied that they were being chased by a crowd of annoying idiots who wanted to kill them. The merchant got scared and said that they have big problems. After all, if now they have to fight with these people, then they definitely won't get to the village today. Perhaps they won't get out of here alive at all. The riders continued to approach faster and faster towards the travelers. The merchant asked the guy who these people were and whether they were enemies or friends for them, and the guy replied that judging by where their spears were pointed, they were clearly not running here with friendly intentions. He ordered the merchant and the child to go to the village without him, and in the meantime, he would distract attention and then catch up with them. The merchant was afraid for his companion and said that it was very dangerous to confront all these people alone. But Zhang said that it was not the time for him to take care of others. He needed to save his life. So he went to the village. He said that these people want revenge, and they will persecute him, so it's better to fight them. Zhang Qian reminded the merchant that he had to pay him and therefore he needed him alive, so it would be best if he immediately went to the village. He stood and waited for his enemies to approach and his daughter to deal with him. The merchant said that he would go to the village and take care of housing and food, so when the guy arrives in the village he can rest. Zhang Qian asked the merchants to take care of his son and be careful when he arrives in the village, he should immediately find a doctor. The merchant ordered his horse to ride forward and they galloped towards the village. The guy continued to wait for his enemies. Zhang Qian understood that he was now facing a serious battle. His eyes lit up yellow. An eagle flew in the sky and looked out for its prey, indicating to its tribe where to move. The bandits approached their enemy and stopped. The eagle flew over the battlefield, and the guy himself stood still and waited for them to start their conversation. The leader of the bandits stepped forward a little to start a conversation with this guy. He said that all this time they were following the trail of the monster that killed his brother, and there was only one trail, and it led them here. This time there were much more bandits than in the 3rd detachment that he killed yesterday. The captain of the 1st squad, Kim Sanchan, spoke to him. He asked the guy how he should react to the act he committed. Zhang smiled and simply remained silent. He understood that now would be the most fun part of this performance. He answered these guys that they found exactly who they were looking for, and after that the head that was hanging on his horse entered the hall. He threw that head to the ground and asked, "Was this man's brother really named Kim Su-deok?" His head fell to the ground and began to roll towards these bandits. The guy deliberately threw it like that so that they could get a better look at it. They were shocked by the cruelty of this man. No one would have thought that he had cut off his head and treated it so carelessly. These people were bloodthirsty murderers and immoral bandits. But even they had never seen such cruelty. Kim Sanchan saw his brother's severed head on the ground, and he felt very hurt and unpleasant looking at it. He felt angry at this stranger. His eyes began to turn red, and his pupils resembled the color of blood, and the veins and capillaries in his eyes began to burst when he saw this. The head and bleeding of his dead brother lay in front of him. He could not believe that this was actually true. The 3rd brother went up to the leader and said that this was really their younger brother, and he was now lying headless in front of them. They looked at each other to decide what they would do next and how they would deal with this monster. The 2nd brother said that if this man alone dealt with the 3rd detachment and killed his younger brother, this means that he is not as simple as he seems. The older brother asked his bandits to bring this guy to him alive because he wants to torture him and make him beg for death. They raised their weapons and said that they would carry out this order and a hellish fate would await this person. They began to offend towards this stranger and wanted to avenge the 3rd captain and their brother. All the bandits were inspired by the desire for revenge. They started shouting and waving their weapons in different directions in this way. They were trying to intimidate this stranger. They wanted to punish him for the atrocities he committed against their comrades and make him suffer for his actions. But Zhang Qian was not afraid of threats and shouting at these people. He calmly continued to stand in place and wait for the moment when they attack him. His face was hidden under his hat, and it was hard to understand what emotions he was experiencing right now. He raised his head up and activated his unique ability, thanks to which fury awakens in him. They ran along the valley, and the partner decided to ask his captain, Juxe, where they were running and who they were pursuing. Juk said that before them, someone had already looked at the crime scene, and these were most likely bandits from other units of that gang. So they are now running on the trail of the guy who killed all these bandits. The partner asked the captain if it was really someone who was headless, and that was the captain of the 3rd squad, and Ju answered that it was the leader. Ju said that the killer acted professionally. He killed everyone at once and left no one alive. They didn't even have time to come to their senses before they were already dead. The partner said that the girl is a very good investigator and even better than their commander. He suggested that the girl look at the patrol officers and try herself for a new position. Otherwise, the old man only knows how to suck up the bosses. They ran along the tracks left by the bandits running here. The girl tried not to miss this trail and get to her destination as quickly as possible. She got angry because my partner was constantly talking. I asked him to shut up and drive in silence because he didn't let her concentrate. Then she saw that the tracks had changed direction and changed the trajectory. The partner continued to follow her and said that he would no longer talk in vain. Ju wanted to personally see a man who could single-handedly take down an entire squad of armed bandits. She couldn't afford to let him go. She didn't understand how he managed to get rid of the bandits who use demonic power so easily. Is this a man who himself wants to take possession of demonic power? Zhang Qian did not want to wait any longer, and he began the battle by running on his horse past the enemies and cutting their bodies with his sword. The opponents tried to strike him with their weapons and somehow hurt him or injure him. But it was all pointless because he very deftly dodged all the attacks and remained unharmed. Zhang Qian did not let a single opponent live. He immediately launched counterattacks on them so that they would no longer interfere with him. He continued to ride forward and left behind only a trail of corpses and blood. He called these bandits stupid idiots because they attack all together at once. This is the most senseless decision on their part. He continued to strike them with his sword and kill the bandit at a very fast speed. He did not leave them alive and struck them with blows, after which they died a painful death. The second brother understood that he needed to intervene in the fight because a lot of fighters died in battle and decided to start fighting this guy. But as soon as he entered the duel, he immediately received a wound in his chest. Zhang Qian decided that this opponent should be fought in a slightly different way, and he mounted his horse in order to make a jump. The guy kicked off the horse with his feet and did a somersault in the air in order to deliver a powerful blow. He spun in the air around his axis and created a sharp wheel with the blade of his sword. The commander of the second detachment was shocked by the abilities of this guy. He did not believe his eyes. He had never seen anything like this in his life. Faster sword strikes cut through space and caused great damage to everyone who came under this sword. After jumping, Zhang Qian did another somersault and landed on the ground. The bandit did not have time to notice the guy's quick movements, but suddenly felt incredibly strong pain. He realized that now the end had come for him, and this stranger killed him just like he killed his brother. He lost control of his horse and fell to the ground, blood flowing from his chest. On this day on the battlefield there was blood everywhere, the blood of bandits who wanted revenge, but in the end did not die on the battlefield. Zhang Qian stopped for a moment and said that he was surprised at how these bandits used their demonic energy. He didn't expect that they knew how to use it. The elder brother was horrified by the fact that he only saw that the stranger had died of the second detachment, as well as the cruelty of both the captain and the third detachment. He did not understand what the captain should do. Now Zhang Qian said that now he will take revenge on them for all the bad deeds that he did not do. Zhang Qian stood and waited for the commander of the first squad to approach him. He understood that now he would have to fight with this man. The corpses of the bandit were scattered on earth, bloody and missing their limbs. Zhang Qian brutally killed his opponents and turned the battlefield into a bloody land. The commander of the first detachment took out his sword and said that all his brothers and comrades died at the hands of pitying rats. He pointed his sword at the enemy and said that he would cut his throat with his own hands. Zhang Qian was not afraid of this man's threats and calmly continued to stand in front of him. Holding his sword in his hand, he was ready to fight. He noticed that this man had a different aura from all the other bandits. This man was much stronger than the others. Strong winds began to appear on the battlefield and raise sand into the air. The man began to accumulate demonic energy in his ball and said that he had not seen such a good warrior for a long time. Who knows martial arts, and it would be fun for him to fight against such an enemy. He possessed very strong demonic energy. It splashed out of his body, and unlike his younger brothers, he knew how to control his aggression. Zhang Qian understood that this man was not bluffing and he actually had great strength. He clearly saw his fighting strength, and it was cloudy and hard to see right away. But even his sword radiated energy. He didn't show his eyes. I hid them under his hat so it was easier to control the situation and keep the enemy in the dark. He took his hat with his hand and took it off. Zhang Qian said that he was not going to spare his opponent and showed him his crazy eyes that burned yellow like fire. He threw his hat aside and said that it was time to end this gang once and for all and kill the last member of this ball of rats' demonic forces. With their help, you can collect combat energy up to 10 times faster than in the usual way demonic power tempts many warriors, and not everyone is able to refuse such power. So many choose the easy path of demonic power and accept it. Ever since the supreme demon Chu, King Hantyu, gained power, people began to use demonic powers to quickly accumulate energy. They began their battle and struck each other very fast and strong blows, but both were experienced and therefore they did not succeed in killing each other right away. The problem of demonic energy is that even King Hantyu could not cope with the crazy energy of this demonic force, but it seizes the mind, and the person loses self-control. The blows came from different directions, and the attack speed increased every second thanks to the demonic power, so Zhang Qian had to be careful not to take damage. Most of those who use demonic powers go insane due to their violent and mysterious nature, which turns them into demons. They become very strong and it seems to them that they can defeat anyone, but this is their main mistake. Why is there a need in this world for a force capable of splitting mountains and dividing seas? It disrupts the harmony and balance of this world. Zhang Qian finally decided to launch his counterattack. He was tired of constantly dodging and blocking blows, so he decided that it was time to strike himself. He mercilessly struck at his opponent. He understood that his enemy had already turned into a monster thirsty for blood and unable to recognize his own mother and his own child. He struck hard and cut his enemy's hand. The captain felt very strong pain in his hand. His rage became even greater. He was no longer able to control his emotions, and he just wanted to kill his enemy. He decided to throw out all his rage in the next attack and shouted to his stranger if he could withstand such strong attacks. Zhang Qian understood that his enemy was delivering very fast and strong blows, and now he could only defend himself and dodge them. He noticed that his anger fueled his strength, and he was only becoming stronger. Zhang Qian blocked another attack with his sword, and saw that his sword was beginning to crack and break. It could not withstand such a load. In addition, the energy of his sword, which at first was cloudy and incomprehensibly has now completely cleared and became crystal clear. He has ideal demonic energy. Zhang Qian didn't understand how strong this guy was and what he was even capable of. The battle of these two experienced warriors gained new momentum and their swords danced a bloody dance. They fought to the last drop of blood, and the captain shouted that he was not like his pathetic bandits. Zhang Qian tried to dodge these blows, but each time the sword came closer and closer to his face, he stopped noticing him. Zhang Qian said that neither in the Central Valley nor on this new continent did he encounter a sword with energy. It's more difficult than he thought. But he had to cope with his opponent. He simply had no other choice. And at that moment their swords collided with each other so hard that the guy's sword could not stand it and shattered into a bunch of small fragments. The captain began to feel his dominance over this guy. He realized that this could be his triumphs. He would finally be able to avenge his brothers. He swung his sword and tried to stab his opponent in order to kill him once and for all and cut off his head. Zhang Qian's sword fell to the ground and remained there. Its blade was broken. The guy understood that he couldn't give up even without having a weapon with him. He had to fight to the end, and he knew that he had succeeded because this battle was difficult to win with the help of swords. He needed to change tactics. He ran around the captain and came behind him, after which the guy used martial arts techniques and turned his fingers into hard stone, and before he struck this blow he said that it would be very painful. He clenched his hand into a fist and was preparing to inflict a very strong gift. He had accumulated a huge amount of energy in his fist in order to inflict as much damage as possible. He landed his punch right in the back and went into him and tried to break some of his bones. The captain felt incredible pain. He did not expect this guy to hit him from behind. Zhang Qian delivered a quick blow with his fists from different sides and constantly changed his place so that the enemy did not have time to understand where he was. Zhang struck his enemy in the chest and broke several ribs at once. He hit him with an uppercut right in the jaw and broke several of his teeth. He used a huge number of blows and spent most of his energy to kill his enemy, and now all that remains is to watch whether he stands or falls. The captain began to scream in pain and lost his balance. He dropped his sword from his hands. His sword fell to the ground and he began to spit blood. After all, he had very severe internal damage after these attacks. Zhang Qian dealt him a crushing thunderclap, which is used in the Imperial Army. The captain fell and began to bleed. He was no longer able to fight. If people saw this battle or watched it from the side, they would probably approach the hero and ask him if he was a warrior of the Imperial Army, but Zhang Qian would answer that he had nothing to do with this. This technique is called internal destruction. He invented it himself. Every time he uses it, he is surprised at its power. Internal destruction is a technique that can kill any opponent no matter how much power he wields. But Zhang Qian doesn't tell anyone about it because he thinks that people shouldn't bother with such things and knowledge. He looked into the open eyes of the dead captain and realized that alone he was able to destroy an entire bandit group that the soldiers had been unable to do for so long. Zhu and his partner were still able to find the battlefield and followed the tracks to this exact place, but even here, only a huge number of corpses and dead bandits awaited them. The partner said that these corpses were killed in the same way as those who had not seen them before. Here, everything is repeated in the same way as in the last place. She hit him on the cheek so that he would shut up and stop interfering with her concentration. Zhu immediately realized that the murder of all these people was done by the same guy. He was able to kill them all alone for the second time, and he was now standing right in front of her. Zhang Qian decided to take a short rest after such a difficult battle and drink water. But suddenly he heard the sound of hooves and realized that strangers were approaching here again. He continued to calmly drink water and wondered when they would finally put him in peace. He heard a female voice asking him who killed all these people. The guy at that moment wiped his mouth with his hand and looked at the girl. He replied that he single-handedly killed all these bandits. The girl at that moment got off her horse and approached him. She hid her eyes under her hat, just like him, in order to make it hard to understand her emotions. Juxei-in was fearless at times like this, and decided to get as close as possible to this guy and look at him. She took off her hat so he could see her face, which helped her gain a little confidence in him. Then she put her hand into her inner pocket and started looking for something in it. She pulled out a badge with her name written on it. The girl introduced herself and said that her name was Juxei-in, and she was from the 71st Patrol Squad of the Murim Union. Zhang Qian carefully read everything that was written on this badge and made sure that the girl was not lying to him after that. She asked who he was. He looked at her trustingly and was silent for a couple of seconds, but in the end he still decided to tell her his name and said that his name was Zhang Qian. Her partner approached the body of the killed commander and began to examine him. She tore his shirt to look at the wounds that were on his body, and when she saw his wound, she was shocked. Zhang Qian carefully watched this girl in order to understand what he was doing, but in the end, he still decided to ask her personally and find out what she was doing. Her partner approached him and told him that this girl was looking for the source of demonic powers. This is actually their squad. The girl carefully tried to find the source of his demonic power. At some point, she felt that it was in the chest area. She pulled out a bloody book from his body and threw it to her partner, after which she told him to burn it. He caught the book with his own hands and said that he thought that these bandits had a book. Zhang Qian was very surprised that these two traveled so long to catch these bandits, and the main goal is to take an ordinary book from them. At that moment, the guy seemed to wake up. He said that he was so carried away by this matter that he forgot to introduce himself. He bowed to the master and said that his name was San Ho, and thanked the stranger for removing this demon. Zhang Qian thought that he had often heard that there were many demons in the new continent, but he never thought that these demons filled the roads. Juk asked the guy if he really single-handedly killed the captain of the first detachment west of here, and he answered that it was true. They threw the book on the floor and doused it with kerosene, and then set it on fire so that it would burn once and for all. Zhang Qian said that he was not only the captain of the first squad, he killed all 3 captains who were here. He even showed the dead captain, and San Ho immediately decided to check if the other captains had the same books in order to burn them. They found another book and burned it because these books have incredibly demonic energy. Zhang Qian approached the girl and asked if she was actually from the Murim Union Patrol Squad. If so, he wanted to ask one question. Can she pay him a reward for killing these 3 captains? He wanted to find out from this girl whether there was actually a reward for the heads of these bandits, because he did not know where the local branch of the Murim Union was located. Zhang said that because he killed these thugs right and left, someone is constantly chasing him and hunting him as if he were a criminal. Juk finally understood his motives, and she felt better. She realized that he just wanted to make money. She said that fortunately she has such powers, and she will give the guy a reward for the heads of these demons and for doing their work. But she said that she only has bonds with her. So to exchange bonds for money, you need to find a trade association or the imperial city. He scratched his beard and thought that bonds were not such a bad option, and in principle, if he could then exchange them for money, he could take advantage of it. He thought that sooner or later he would be able to exchange them for money. Therefore, he agreed to take the bonds from the girl. When he received his papers as a payment, the guy immediately got on his horse and went on. He needed to get to the village in which the merchant with the child was San Ho did not understand why they let him go so easily, because this person could steal a book with demonic powers. But Juk calmed him down and said that he did not need it. She said that his fighting skills are much stronger than any demonic powers. Why would he need demonic powers that he can easily handle with his bare hands is stupid. She said that they had better start looking for secret alliances now. Sang Ho saw his body and was shocked that he was killed by a crushing thunderclap, and this means that the guy who killed him is a soldier of the Imperial Army. The girl said that they need to find out. San Ho asked why they always have so much to do and when they finally have a rest. But the girl said that she found a bandit in the map of the bandit lair from the first captain. They need to go there. She said that they need to go to this lair as quickly as possible, because the bandits usually kill adult captives and kidnap children in order to sell them. They must save these children. When San Ho heard that the children are now in danger, I can't save him like that. He immediately didn't want to rest. San Ho was very interested. Did this warrior know that these bandits were torturing them? Perhaps this was one of the reasons why he killed the bandits. One thing they knew for sure was that soon they would have to meet this warrior again. Near the lake. There was a small village called Jak Ho. Few people had heard of this village because it was located in a very inconspicuous place. When Zhang Qian arrived in the village, he was already met on Central Street near the entrance by a merchant along with his child. Huan was very happy when he saw his warrior uncle. He would be delighted that this uncle returned here alive. The merchant already looked much better compared to their last meeting. He was no longer so pale and could even smile. Zhang Qian was happy that he saved these 2 people, and they can now feel happy. He decided to stop and rest a bit before setting off on his journey again. He went to a doctor who worked in this village and healed his wounds. He needed to gain strength because then he had to go to Cheonsangak. He decided to take a short break and deal with his affairs that he had accumulated, and just relax in a pleasant company. Zhang Qian could not sleep that night. He lay and looked at the moon that was visible through the window in his room. He thought about how this business would end tomorrow and hoped that he would be able to get some rest. The next day, there were a lot of people in the village of Cheonsangak. All the merchants went to work and customers were constantly choosing new goods from them. Trade carts and carriages with important people were constantly lying around the square. There were also many different warriors in the city. They chose new weapons and armor for themselves. In the central square, there was a horse riding on it. A child was sitting on top of it. A man with black hair was flying out of the horse. It was a merchant. Zhang was walking behind him. The merchant went first and led 2 horses. The boy carefully looked around. because he was interested in absolutely everything that happens in this city. Zhang Qian told the merchant that it was a pretty village, and he was surprised that people were able to set up so many shops in one place. The merchant said that they had already come to the woman he was talking about and warned the guy that she was not like other women. She went out onto the balcony and saw that below it was worth taking her, and her nephew Huang was riding on a horse. She was surprised that they didn't arrive so soon, but then she immediately smiled and called the guests to her place on the second floor. But she was surprised that there was another person with them. The merchant helped his son get off his horse and then told the guy that he could come in with them. Zhang looked carefully at this building and realized that the owner makes very good money if she owns such an establishment. They entered the task, and the hostess immediately set the table to feed them, and she thanked the stranger for saving the life of her son-in-law and nephew. She brought him a bag of money and said that it was a small gift for his kindness. He took the red bag of coins in his hand and felt that the girl decided to thank him with all her heart because the bag was heavy. He thanked the girl for such a generous reward and could not believe that he actually got so much money. The merchant said that they should thank him because only thanks to him they got there safely and were able to stay alive. He invited the guy to stay with them for a couple of days. Zhang asked the owner of this house where the nearest blacksmith and trade association are located in this city. She said that she would definitely tell him and lead him to these places. Huang was riding a horse and went with the guys. He really wanted to come to Zhuo, but the lady told him to behave calmly and quietly and not fall off his horse. Huang said that he would drive carefully and not fall because he loves his auntie very much. And after that, he wanted to ask Zhang a question. He asked the guy where he learned martial arts because he also wants to be as strong. He said that in Zhongwan there are a couple of martial arts masters who teach for money. The skills themselves shine for me, but they teach well. In general, he studied this in different places. Huang looked at the warrior in surprise and said that he heard that martial arts are taught only in special schools, so it was with the old traditional schools and ancient families on the new continent. This is something like a preparatory course for those who want to join the Imperial Army, and as soon as you get into this army, you will begin to study real martial arts and earn money from them. Huang finally understands why the Imperial Army soldiers are considered true martial artists. The lady said that they have already arrived at the place. She said that this forge is the best of the 3 forges in all of Zhongsangok. Zhang looked at the badge that hung near the blacksmiths. They usually hang it so that people can notice the forge from afar. But for some reason, the guy was surprised. Every time he saw this badge, he decided to choose a new sword for himself because his was broken. After the last battle, Zhang found one sword that he liked more than the rest and chose it. This sword was even better than his previous sword. He exchanged the pieces of paper that the girl in the desert gave him for real money and earned a good amount. Zhang Qian felt happy at this moment because he was able to get his money back and also earn good money for these adventures. Now from God, he can afford everything he wanted. He approached a merchant who sold straw hats and decided to buy himself the most expensive new hat. Now he looked great and his image was complete. He felt happy and he liked this village much more than the previous one. The lady asked this warrior if he liked to drink because she had very good wine. The guy answered her with gratitude for this offer. She said that it was time for him to leave. Huang said that his aunt cooks very tasty and asked the warriors to stay at least one more day, and he wanted to learn how to fight. Zhang said that he could not teach the boy martial arts because he did not stick to one direction. Said that his aunt would teach him better. She is also a martial arts master. He remembered that moment when she gave him the bag of money and felt the energy in her hand. He immediately knew that she was a martial arts master. The mistress felt embarrassed because this guy immediately noticed her martial abilities, and the boy was delighted that her aunt was also a martial artist. Zhang said that he would leave the city before sunset and thanked the girl for showing him the way. He looked at the boy and said goodbye to him. And he wished him good luck in his future life and said that if the boy wanted, he would definitely learn to fight. After he said goodbye to everyone, he kicked his horse and ordered it to go forward. The horse immediately moved. Huan was very upset when he saw that this man had left. He was a real hero for him, and the boy wanted to be like him. The lady also saw something special in this guy. She wouldn't mind if he stayed overnight at her house, but all they couldn't do was just stand and watch him go there or leave the city territory. She saw how the boy was not taking his eyes off him, and immediately realized that the boy liked the image of this guy. She told him that men don't cry, and he immediately wiped his tears. Huang said that he was not crying. Something just got into his eye. She understood that he would remember this moment forever. The boy asked her to teach him martial arts, and she understood that it was yours. He gave this boy a dream for his whole life. Zhang Qian rode through the desert, as always, completely alone towards new adventures. Zhang Qian went to the next city, which was much larger in size than the cities before. He visited the nearest tavern and started gambling again. The man sitting at the table with him said that the guy was very bad at playing dominoes. Zhang responded to the players who were sitting at the table with him that they were all up in arms against him and wanted him to lose. The man I was sitting to his right at the table said that the guy is terrible at playing dominoes, and he has absolutely no playing skills. Zhang was angry because he couldn't win at these guys, and he felt angry. They won a good amount of money from this guy, and so one of the men ordered the owner of the establishment another bottle of alcohol. Zhang was very upset because he used his fighting energy to see if the players sitting at the table with him were cheating, but they did not cheat, and he lost to them in a private game. This meant that the guy was actually very bad at this game. The men said that this is the first time they have seen a man who is always with his sword, despite the fact that he is a Marima man. They said he shouldn't carry a sword if he couldn't even win at gambling because someday he might get stabbed for it. But he said that he is capable of taking care of himself, and he does not need the advice of these men. Zhang said that he lost all his money to these guys and now he can't continue playing, so he has to leave. They said that as soon as he has money, he can come back because he is always welcome here. But the guy started getting angry when he heard this. He was upset because he realized that he had never been a good player, and this upset him. Suddenly he heard music at the next table and wondered what those beautiful sounds were. At the middle table sat a man in a straw hat and red clothes playing a musical instrument. This man's face was not visible, but his music captivated her. It was impossible to tear her away from her. She wanted to listen to it more and more. It was a very soft performance of beautiful melodies on the mandolin on a drowsy afternoon. Zhang was delighted with this music. Listening to it brought great pleasure. He received incredible pleasant emotions. When this melody fell into his ears, the musician continued to play the mandolin and did not pay attention to the visitors of this establishment. He played for himself. Visitors heard this music and put aside their business. They wanted to enjoy this wonderful moment and take a break from ordinary affairs. The tavern immediately came to life when the music appeared here. People began to smile and laugh. They looked happy when they heard these beautiful melodies. Zhang became interested in what the life of this musician is like, who wanders from place to place and plays his music in various establishments. He suggested that she simply wanders around the world, scattering in the wind without a specific place of residence. If this was the case, could she be as cheerful as the cheerful farmers and merchants? He closed his eyes and tried to completely surrender to this music. He felt like a dreaming man all alone after losing his money, but he was still happy. Yes, strangers came in. They were armed and very serious. These were 3 men armed with swords in gray-brown clothes. They were clearly trying to find someone in this establishment because they looked serious and dangerous. It's unlikely they came here just to relax. They went to the center of the hall, and the main one among these 3 men said that he had found the girl he needed. Zhang took a closer look at these guys and tried to understand who they are and what they want here. Their leader approached the girl who was playing the mandolin and asked if she was Zhu Yeran. She continued to play her musical instrument in a calm voice and asked who was asking her. This man introduced himself to her and told her his name. He said that his name is Galina Yong and he is from the great family of Shandong. Even if she doesn't know his name, she should know his last name. She continued to play her mandala and did not answer the man immediately. She said that she could guess why they were looking for her and said that I knew that their young master was making a fuss out of nowhere. One of these guys couldn't stand it, shouted at her and called the woman a slave. He asked how she dared speak about their young master like that. She said that I work and play the mandolin and get my salary, and the fact that their young master fell in love with her is his problem. The people of the establishment carefully watched these events unfold and listened as these three strangers accused the woman of bewitching their master. Zhang began to get angry at these guys for interrupting such wonderful music and wanted to somehow help the girl so that these idiots would get rid of her. They continued to accuse the girl of starting to pester their young master and seducing him, thereby spoiling Zhang Qian's mood. They also accused her of stealing treasures from the young master's family home. But the girl started laughing and said that it was all nonsense and she didn't know about any treasures. She suggested that these guys just come up and ask this young gentleman everything properly, because what they are not now calling their accusations looks like real slander. Their leader started yelling at the girl and said that if she didn't confess everything, they would have to use their swords to make her tell the truth. She started laughing and said that she would never in her life justify this to a 16-year-old boy who fell in love with her because he is an ordinary brat. She asked them if they were actually members of this young master's family. She said that if this brat's family actually cared about the guy, they wouldn't have sent 3 amateurs like these men here. She said that in their place it was necessary to send here a real warrior who could bear the name of the family with pride, and not 3 amateurs who behave like ordinary bandits. The main man said that he and his 2 brothers were enough to deal with a girl like her. People were shocked that there was now a fight. Zhang Qian could not allow 3 armed men to attack one girl who had a mandolin. They raised their swords up and decided to strike the first blow in order to kill the girl immediately. But it was not as simple as it might seem at first glance. The girl immediately jumped up from the chair and pushed off the table with her feet. The man struck with his sword, but the girl was no longer there and he missed. She flew into the air and hovered above them. The men missed with his sword and cut the back of the chair. They didn't expect her to move so fast and be able to jump so high. The men were shocked that this girl was so dexterous. She made knives from her dress and threw them at the enemy. 2 knives hit her enemy's body. The third one flew past. One knife hit this guy right in the back of the head, and he felt severe pain and spat blood out of his mouth. She landed on the nearest table after a high jump, and the plates that were on this table began to fly in different directions. People were shocked by what was happening here. She said that they were the first to draw their swords and attack her, that she killed this man. It was only the most ordinary self-defense. The other 2 brothers were very scared of how this girl was fighting and asked the owner of the establishment to contact the sheriff because she was crazy. People got scared and began to run away from this establishment as quickly as possible so that they too would not be dragged into this fight. The owner of the establishment grabbed his head with his hands and asked why the fight started in his tavern, because he would again have to change the entire interior here and buy new furniture with his own money. His nephew came up to him and told his uncle that this month they would have no money left again, and his uncle told him that first they just need to get out of here. Zhang carefully watched how this girl fought, and he was delighted with how well she fought. And the most important thing that interested him in this girl was that she was incredibly beautiful. He drank his alcohol and watched her. He could not take his eyes off her. She continued to fight these 3 thugs and gave them a good fight. They either struck quickly with it, but it was all useless because she couldn't dodge them. In response to their attacks, they received massive counterattacks, after which they were unable to do anything. She jumped up and dodged 2 A's at once that were inflicted by these brothers. She moved very quickly and deftly and was very light on her feet. It felt like she was using a martial art technique of the air. For the first time in his life, Zhang saw people who used the martial arts of flight in this new world. Usually, these techniques are inaccessible to many warriors. But this is a woman. She can become the pioneer of flying martial arts on this new continent. After all, no one else knows how to master these techniques so well. She was tired of fighting them in hand-to-hand combat and decided that it was time to take up arms and fight these guys on equal terms. They tired her out pretty much during this fight, and she already wanted to finish them off quickly. These scumbags did not allow her to rest in peace and are trying to kill her, so they must pay for this with their own lives. She struck very quickly with her sword, and the enemy did not have time to notice anything. He just felt incredible pain. She cut up and mutilated their bodies so that everyone would understand that it was better not to mess with her and not to cross her path. Her ball was very sharp and was capable of cutting the opponent's body into two halves with a blow above it. Drops of blood ticked from the blade of her sword and fell to the floor. She created real chaos in this establishment. Everything was scattered and broken after she fought with these two thugs. But she couldn't be blamed for this because she was only defending her life. It was all the fault of the young master who fell in love with her and caused such a pogrom here. She hid her sword after the battle ended. She needed to calm down a little. After she caused such a pogrom here, she didn't want to do it, but she was forced to defend herself. She raised her head up and took a deep breath in and out in order to calm down after this fight. Zhang Qian began to applaud the girl after her fight was over. He was delighted with what he had just seen. It was a real show for him. He looked at the girl and smiled. He couldn't believe that someone could master such a unique martial arts technique, and he also wanted to please her. She looked at him and tried to understand what was going on with this guy and why he was reacting so joyfully to what just happened here.